Accessing library computer data.
And to make sure that history never forgets the name Enterprise.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Penske Podcast. If you haven't tuned in before, this is a podcast where we are running through all 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, giving our thoughts and feelings about each and every one. Right now we're up to episode 11 of season 4. This one is called Data's Day. Directed by Robert Weimer. Teleplay goes to Harold Apter and Ronald D. Moore, and the story credit goes to Harold Apter. It was originally aired back on January 7th, 1991. This is the episode where Data spends a day in the life of Data on the Enterprise, and we sort of follow him around as Chief O'Brien gets married and all that good stuff. Just going to be me talking about this one. It's probably going to be quick. So right after this break, let's go deep on Data's Day.
My friend Chief O'Brien often says that above all else, he wants to make Keiko happy. Since canceling the wedding will make her happy, I must conclude that Chief will be pleased at her decision.
I have good news. Oh? Keiko has made a decision designed to increase her happiness. She has canceled the wedding.
She what? Cancel the wedding? Today? Without even a word? Of all the childish, selfish, irresponsible things to do.
Next time, maybe I should deliver the good news.
You know, I really like the day in the life type stories here on the Enterprise that we get to see every once in a while. It's a nice change of pace. You sort of appreciate them now as you get older. They weren't really probably the most exciting episodes when I was younger and watching this show, thinking, oh, like no action in that, no action in any of these episodes. Although there's a little bit of action in this one towards the end, but it's really not one of those ones that sticks with you. But as I get older, I like these episodes a little bit more. There is Patrice on Board Game Geek. Actually sort of warned me about this one, saying he likes the episode, but it's a little soap opera-y, and I think that's a pretty good interpretation of it. It is fairly soap opera-y. This is the first time we meet Keiko O'Brien, who is, or she's Keiko at this point, and soon to be Mrs. O'Brien. This is the episode where Chief O'Brien gets married. It's a little bit weird. The marriage is a little bit weird, mostly because Keiko seems to be a terrible person. Miles O'Brien doesn't seem to be that good either. Neither of them seem to be very dealing with this wedding like adults, really, where she's calling off the wedding and asking Data to explain it to her fiancé at this point. And Chief O'Brien wants Data to talk to Keiko about it. And it all comes across as a little bit silly. It's a little bit odd that Data has to do this. You wonder how long they've been dating, Miles and Keiko. You wonder how long they've actually known each other. They don't seem particularly comfortable with each other, and that's something that's going to continue for the rest of their time on screen through Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. The actors are not great with each other. It's safe to say that, I think. There's really no chemistry between them. Everything is super stilted. She's not that great of an actress. He's a pretty good actor. And you can really see them struggling to get through this stuff. But they're really just a backdrop in this episode, which basically functions as a day in the life where Data is recording a journal. And a nice callback, he's recording a journal for Dr. Maddox, who was the guy who was trying to claim that he was not a sentient life form in The Measure of a Man way back in Season 2. Apparently Data wouldn't have any emotions, so he's sort of keeping up a correspondence with Dr. Maddox. We don't know if this is reciprocal or if Data is just taking a time out of his day to write a letter or record a log and send it off to Dr. Maddox. But he's basically recording a day in the life of him, sort of what he goes through. So a little bit of minor soap opera stuff on the side. There's a story about a Vulcan ambassador named T'Pel who is being escorted around on the Enterprise. And I really liked this story because they're setting it up as T'Pel needs to go to the neutral zone for some reason, but because most of the perspective is told through Data's eyes, we don't really get a good look at what's going on until much later in the episode. And I really liked it because it's interesting to see how someone could observe the things that happen on this ship from a point of view where they're not actually right with the audience and like right front and center and getting all the information. Data's a little bit kept in the dark. The story exists on the periphery of the first half, which is a really cool touch. You sort of get little mysterious scenes and, you start building suspicion that T'Pel is not all she's cracked up to be. ultimately it's revealed that she's a Romulan spy, and they've been bringing her back, and the Federation has been fooled, taken for a fool, and then the Federation has to run off with its tail between its legs. It's a neat little thing that they do here. I really enjoy it. It's interesting that you see something. We've talked before how, Picard is probably seen by the lower ranking officers or the people that he's not in close contact with on the ship as something of a standoffish guy. He always has weird, awkward interactions with underlings that he's not particularly comfortable with. And it's always weird to sort of get the perspective of someone who's dealing with Picard that doesn't deal with him on a day-to-day basis and how it would shape your perception of him. This is kind of the same thing, where Data is not truly on top of everything that's happening, and he's not really suspicious. He's a little bit curious about it, but he's not really suspicious because it's the Data character. And I think at one point he mentions himself, like if he was a human, he might be considered worried about going to the neutral zone or something, but because he's an android, he doesn't feel anything, and he just goes about his day. It's a cool little story. I like how it's a minor point overall in the general scheme of things. It gets a little bit more actiony at the end where the Romulans show up and decloak, and then a whole bunch of other Romulan ships show up. The Enterprise has to run off. But I appreciate the look at, sort of interspecies espionage that's going on. Apparently there's a lot of spies. You think they'd be able to genetically test people to see what they truly were, although I guess Romulans and Vulcans haven't been split apart from each other for very long, have they? They are sort of the same species. They just grew up in different worlds. I like that. I like the look at every time we get a look at how chain of command works on the ship. I always appreciate it. This one shows us a bunch of briefings between people taking the shifts over. Data obviously works the night shift as an android, and Riker relieves him in the morning. They give each other briefings. It's all kind of hunky-dory, kind of a neat little thing. And then Worf at the end gives a briefing when Data takes command again to go into the second night shift of the show. It's there's a lot of minutia. Apparently they care about people breaking their arms, which is news, I guess, that commanding officers would need to know about, the people's various injuries. There's a birth on the ship, which makes sense a little bit. That seems more important than people getting injured. But the minutia is interesting to me, and the sort of chain of command is always very fascinating whenever they bring that up. I always like seeing people not Picard in command of the bridge. It's always a nice little... it makes it feel like an actual universe where stuff is going on in the background while you're not watching it and while an episode isn't being recorded, if it was a real life show, right, or a real life event. I like the fact that there are different shifts. I like the fact that the night shift, they turn the lights down, which is a nice touch. I like the fact that Data works the night shift. It's a logical conclusion that would happen. It also is kind of weird how there is a night shift at all, because you wouldn't, I guess humans would need a sort of circadian rhythm type thing to their life out in space. Although I wonder if that would go away. I wonder if people in space need to stick to a rhythm like that, or if they fall into some other weird thing. I don't know what the astronauts do or anything like that. The other weird thing is there's a moment here where Data has to get a gift for the O'Brien wedding. And he meets up with Worf, and they stand next to apparently what is like a replicator gift shop where you can look at various things and replicate them. And it made me aware of how weird gift giving is in the 24th century. I can understand giving gifts if they have like a sentimental value, but in an era where you can just replicate things and give them, I even wonder why gift giving is still a thing. And I can understand it sort of existing, but I don't really feel like people would appreciate you giving them something that they could just replicate on their own, because there's no money going into it. I can understand if you're emotionally attached to something, or you paint something, or you do some work, but these guys are clearly just replicating shitty wine glasses for the O'Briens, and they're just going to give them, and then they're going to replicate some wrapping paper and replicate a wrapped glass after they think about it for a couple minutes. I thought that was kind of a funny thing. It's also the introduction of the dancing doctor storyline. We've complained before about how Beverly Crusher doesn't really have a lot to do. Well, they brought some real-life Gates McFadden stuff into this one, where Dr. Crusher teaches Data how to dance, in a funny little scene where she teaches him how to tap dance at first because she doesn't realize he wants to learn how to dance for a wedding, and then they do the appropriate for a wedding dancing, which I feel is slightly realistic. Slow dancing is it's done at some weddings, but any recent wedding, it feels like mostly people are just doing you make me want to shout and things like that. So I don't know how much slow dancing besides the bride and the groom is actually done at weddings nowadays. But it's a nice little touch for the Beverly Crusher character. Shows off her tap dancing skills. It shows all that. You can clearly see in the high definition where they cut Brent Spiner out and they put in a tap dancing double. That's always nice to see. It's nice to see that they do it for extended shots. There was a lot of indifference to getting it right, because I think they knew back then, obviously, that the televisions weren't going to get a resolution high enough where you could really tell what's going on. So get anyone in there, paint his face silver, and call him Data, and that's the end of it. It's an interesting little episode. It's a kind of a charming little episode. I guess I'd describe it as charming. It's a little bit soap opera-y. You get a nice little glimpse at everybody else. You know, Chief O'Brien gets his moment to shine, which he hasn't had. He's been there for so long. He's been in so many episodes in the background, working as a transporter chief. And, you know, lo and behold, we can't have any of the main characters getting married, so we're going to do the next best thing. We're going to bring in a side character that you don't really know anything about. You don't know that he's engaged. You don't know anything like that. You don't know his situation whatsoever. We're going to bring him in, and he's going to get married to give us a little bit of family drama on the side. It's been a lot of family drama in this season. I think this episode is one of the more entertaining in a way. Family is clearly better, but this is a entertaining enough episode where you don't have to focus on the main characters. You don't have to focus on something like Brothers, where there's a sort of unsubstantialness to the whole storyline. It's just like light filler that goes down easy and is, you know, pretty palatable. So that said, I'm going to play a clip. We're going to take a break. I'm going to play an audio clip, and then I'm going to come back. I'll give you a rating and final thoughts.
All systems normal, sir. We are on course for Adelphus 4. Engineering is realigning the main deflector dish. Sickbay reports Lieutenant Umbato broke 2 ribs during a holodeck exercise, and sensors continue to gather long-range information on the Murasaki quasar.
Very well. I have the bridge.
Aye, sir.
If being human is not simply a matter of being born flesh and blood, if it is instead a way of thinking, acting, and feeling, then I am hopeful that one day I will discover my own humanity.
Begin night watch.
Until then, Commander Maddox, I will continue learning, changing, growing, and trying to become more than what I am.
So the final thoughts. There we go. Final thoughts for Data's Day. It's a good episode. I enjoy this one. It's been a while, I feel, since we've had just a sort of light, enjoyable episode like this. A lot of the other ones have either not been pulling off what they've been trying to do, or they've been sort of mired down in the sort of drama that isn't really hitting on all cylinders. So it's nice to take a little bit of a break, get a little bit of a glimpse into the day-to-day of the Enterprise, a little bit behind the scenes and how people are actually having relationships and all that stuff. And you get to do it through the eyes of Data, who is... This episode really only works with Data, right? I'm not that interested in the day of the life of Riker. Picard as a day of the life is kind of interesting. I wouldn't be interested in Riker. Worf is a little too weird. Geordi, I don't even know what they would be doing. Troy would be boring, and Beverly Crusher would be boring as well. I honestly don't know what Geordi would do in his spare time. They haven't really developed that. He'd probably go out on numerous dates and strike out with women, as apparently all the show's been giving us. But no, it works for Data. Data has a unique perspective. I mean, it's coming clear that Data is obviously one of the better characters on the show. I don't think that's ever in dispute, but I think he's clearly the best character on this show. Star Trek always works well with the sort of logical-based character. It's always the strength of writing staffs, I think, who can really hone in on things. All the Data episodes are very interesting about what they are about and like what they show or what they say about humanity. He's a very good character for that. Spiner's performance is excellent. And all that jazz. Nothing you haven't heard before. Data's Day. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's an episode you could show to a non-Star Trek fan. I think they'd appreciate it. It's not amazing. It's above average. It's strong. Very enjoyable to watch. There's a lot of stuff going on between all the different plot strands, how they interact, and, you know, the getting a little slice of life on the Enterprise. Thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed the content and you're watching on YouTube, a like and a comment's appreciated. If you're on iTunes, a rating and review helps get the show out there. I'm going to be back in a couple days with The Wounded, which is an excellent episode, and Trek About is going to return to talk about that with me. So thank you guys again for listening, and I will see you later.